All right, it says we are live. So I see we've already got people here in the comments. We'll just kind of chatter for just a few minutes to let everybody else catch up to know that we're live, and then we'll officially start the video in a minute. So I'm going to start just saying hello to everybody who's here. Betty, hello, welcome. Holly said she's loving this read so far. I'm so excited about this interview. I love doing author interviews, but there's something very special about doing a debut author interview for sure. Adam said halfway through and loving it. Fantastic. Tall Aaron, glad to support a fellow author. Absolutely. Love that. Lauren, my girl, hello. I'm happy to have you here. Yeah, so what we will do just for a few minutes, just what's everybody reading right now, and then we'll get into the interview. Just to kind of, I like to just give a few minutes for people to get on here. So Dylan, you go first. Tell us what you're currently reading and if you're liking it.
I'm on the last few chapters of Jade City right now. So things are going down. This has been super fun. I put this on 2 days ago on my headphones, and I listened to like most of it in one day. I just couldn't put it down.
I'm so happy. I'm so happy. As soon as you said Jade City, I was like, if I need to mute my headphones, just let me know so I don't hear your thoughts on it. I am so emotionally attached to that. I know Lauren is currently reading Jade War, the second one. So Linda is here, Sean. She says hi. A couple of these ladies are also in the Patreon and always love to support everybody here. So I'm so thrilled that you're loving that, Dylan. That makes me so happy. Sean, are you reading anything right now?
Yeah, Dylan, you can't go wrong with Fond du Lis. But I'm reading Bloodsworn, so I know I'm so far behind everyone else, but I'm halfway through Shadow and absolutely loving it. It's the writing's incredible. I'm a big fan of John Gwynne as is, and yeah, like I was saying before, Orc is scaring the hell out of me, and I'm loving it.
She's such a fantastic character, and that's like the Fury. You're on Fury of the Gods, right? I always okay. Shadow of the Gods. Fury is the new one. See, like you always got to correct me because titles they kind of lose. They go out of my brain. But that is one of the first books that I read where I was so enraptured with the battle scenes. I typically kind of zone out in battle scenes, but that one I was like riveted. So I think you're right. They're so fabulous. So I am currently reading Empire of the Damned by Jay Kristoff. So I'm having a good time with that. I'm very excited about that. Okay, we'll pick up a few more comments and then we'll go ahead and get into the interview. Break Even Books. Hi, Sean. I was just reading your email about this and managed to hop over to the video for a bit before I have to head out. Well, thank you for being here. The video will be... Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Sean.
I was just saying thanks for coming, Eric. And I could also see just how happy Dylan was made when you just said you were reading Empire of the Damned.
Yeah, I kind of didn't give him a chance to respond. That was quite rude of me.
Oh no, I was just very happy to see it there. I'm actually reading that one at Gibbswell at the moment because so many of you guys are reading it, and I just can't miss out on the fun.
Yeah, is this the second time for you then?
Yeah.
Yeah, exciting. Jade City was an amazing read. Absolutely, love Shadow of the Gods as well. This book, Sean's book, is amazing. We'll circle back to that one. Orca, absolutely. This book is amazing. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get into the interview now. So this is an interview with Sean Bobby Kerr, who is a debut fantasy author of his new book that just came out on Halloween, October 31st, A Journey Thrice Begun, right? So just really quick, Dylan and I are going to introduce ourselves if you're new to our channel. I'm Crystal, Crystal's Bookish Life. I make bookish videos a couple times a week, mostly about fantasy and romance books, and that's about it. And then Dylan, you can go right ahead.
Oh, I'm just some dude that talks about books occasionally, and yeah, that's about it, really.
He's not giving himself enough credit. He has a great channel, really fun videos, and great. He speaks really well about books. Great breakdowns on them as well. So
thank you.
And then we will turn it over to Sean to introduce himself and let us know about his book.
Yeah, so I obviously don't review books. I try to write them and get you two to review them and do all the hard work. But yeah, I'm Sean Bobby Kerr, probably best known for being one of the million unknown indie authors in the world.
So tell us a little bit about your book. This is your debut. It just released, A Journey Thrice Begun. If you could briefly tell us what it's about so that people who don't know might want to pick it up.
Yeah, of course. I'll try and make it as spoiler free as I can. So I guess it's a fantasy trilogy that centers on Everett Dwyer. Unfortunately for Everett, he doesn't want to be the protagonist of a fantasy trilogy. I guess that the premise is really in our world, I'm sure all of us have had friends and family who just have not wanted to go to college or university, even though everyone seems to be pushed into it nowadays. And I thought it would then follow that in a magical world, you would get the same sort of people, but they wouldn't want to go to a magical university or college. And I guess that's Everett to a T. I almost started writing thinking of him as almost like a reverse Harry Potter. So he got his invite to go study at a magical university and just didn't want to go. So yeah, it's a very different fantasy story. I target it to readers who, maybe really enjoyed the mysteries of Harry Potter. So I guess finding out who Sirius Black was, or like what was inside the Chamber of Secrets, but maybe didn't want to be stuck at a school, which is certainly the case for me. So maybe we want to be solving these sort of dark mysteries, but kind of on a quest, on an adventure more like Lord of the Rings.
That's great. I love that. And I really love how you did say that this is like maybe if Harry Potter decided he didn't want to go to a magical school. I think that I didn't really put that together until you just said that, but I really love that take on the story because that's exactly what it feels like. There's still magic is just seeped into every single page of this book, but yeah, it doesn't take place at a school setting. So I love that. That's great.
Thanks.
I also really liked how you said that had this element of mystery to it because I know Dylan and I were talking a little bit about this after I finally had finished it. He would beat me by a long shot, but we both were saying how there was this element of the book that we had to find out what was happening. We had to find out what was going to happen next. This level of intrigue that we didn't really know where we were headed, but we were so curious to find out what was going to happen next just through the whole thing. So I didn't really also pinpoint that as being a mystery element, but now that you said that, I can see that's exactly what was in there.
Yeah, that's sort of almost a consequence of me failing my year 10 at school because I was reading so much Agatha Christie. Like I actually just fell in love with her mysteries at a very young age. And I remember being like feeling really sorry for my parents back in the day when I started first getting into mystery and becoming like a mystery obsessive because I think because my door was closed, they just assumed I was studying. They're like, wow, he's doing a great job. And then when I just failed everything, I don't think they've realized that I was like just slowly making my way through the catalog of Agatha Christie. And if anyone here has ever read Agatha Christie, you'll know her books are not in short supply.
Yeah. Have you read her, Dylan, before?
I haven't, no.
Yeah. I've only read one of hers, and I picked it up because I was like in such a reading slump. Nothing was catching my interest, and that was suggested to me, and I picked it up and literally read it in one sitting, and then there were none. That's the only one of hers that I've read. The mystery in there was something unlike any that I've ever read before. Like I just had to know what happened. So it makes complete sense to me that you were doing that your whole 10th grade year. Is that what you said?
Yeah, year 10. Well, I don't know what that guy translates to for America because I know Dylan's obviously an Aussie as well, but like when I was 16.
Sophomore?
Sophomore, yeah. There you go. That's what it is here. Yeah.
It's what we get for watching English TV. Thanks, Dylan.
I watch too much.
Yeah.
So just another shout out to anybody who's watching. If you have comments or questions, specifically if you have any questions for Sean, go ahead and leave them in the comments and I'll keep track of them and we'll get to those too so that everybody has a chance to ask him some questions. So that's a great synopsis of your book. Also, just so everybody knows, I will have links down in the description of where you can follow Sean and where you can purchase his book if you want to. It is available now. So let's move into talking about your writing career, Sean. So when did you first know that you wanted to be a writer?
Probably about 3 years ago. So it was a really slow transition. So my family's I don't know if I've ever told you this, Crystal, actually, but my whole family are writers. So Right now, like I'm getting all these pats in the back and like big congratulations for releasing my book from all like friends. But on the other hand, my family are sort of just a bit more like about time, because I think I'm like, yeah, I'm quite a bit behind my sister who's released books, my mum, my granddad. So it took a while. Like I didn't get into it till my 30s to start writing. But yeah, so bit behind the rest of my family, but I'm slowly trying to catch up.
And where did you get the idea to go into A Journey Thrice Begun? Where did that pick up?
That, that was probably, I think with most fantasy reading obsessives, it is like all three of us really. When you finally decide to put down the book and pick up the pen, it more or less comes down to so much of fantasy feels familiar that you kind of think you might be able to do something a bit different. And that was where it came from. I was like, okay, what's the most different thing that could happen in fantasy? I was like, okay, well, every single book, I just read like 4 books in a row where the protagonist went to a magical university. I was like, but why though?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I guess a lot of questions come from, or a lot of answers rather, come from what if questions. So what if, what if, what if? And it was really early on, the characters just fell into my head. So I had the characters from the very beginning. And just, I don't know how it happened, but they never really changed. And then it was just sort of creating the world around them to help them tell their story. And yeah, I guess that's where it came from. Probably a bit of a character-centered writer. So the characters came first, the world building came second.
I love that. Go ahead, Dylan.
Yeah, and just growing up in just a house surrounded by writers, what were the like influences and authors that are just big in your household, and then the ones that resonate with you the most that helped you to focus on characters? And
yeah, well, I think for all of us, so it's actually Mum's fault I failed year 10. Now I think about it, because she got me into Agatha Christie. So yeah, Agatha Christie, Tolkien was big with my mum. My dad's not a huge reader, which to my mum's frustration, but mum would read Tolkien. I think like he was the first person that really showed me like how incredible the imagination could be, and that was at a really young age. Mum also bought me the Harry Potters. I think it was like my granddad's idea to get the Harry Potters into my hands early. So I think we're all around that age group where that might have been the first books that really kickstarted our read. I'm pretty sure I learned to read almost reading Harry Potter, which is a weird thing. It was kind of cool. I was really lucky with the books going along, and that I kind of got to grow up with the characters. So they were really big in my household with me and my sister. We'd always be talking about the Harry Potter world, and to the extent that like Daniel Radcliffe's birthday is on the same day as me. So I literally grew up with Daniel Radcliffe. So as his movies got a bit darker, I think it sort of fitted my life, because you don't want that child-esque book 1. When you get to book 7, when you're 18, you want it to be something dark. And I was very lucky in that. And I think we also really liked some Spanish authors. I don't know why, because I'm not Spanish at all, but we had a lot of Spanish authors in the house, and the books were always floating around, like the translations, obviously, because my Spanish is terrible. But like Carlos Ruiz Zafón, the Shadow of the Wind was a book I read really early on. That just like really hit me in the heartstrings. It was just a fantastic read. And more recently, it's actually flipped. So I'm trying to get my mum to read books. So like this sort of Kaigen I gave to her for that emotional gut punch that we all know. And yeah, that broke her like a Kit Kat. I remember when she came out after reading it, she was in an emotional state. So I was like making her cups of tea to be like, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's a great book though. But yeah, it's that gut punch. Like M.L. Wang is just incredible. So like, yeah, to answer your question though, there's a million little influences in our house, but yeah, lots of favorites.
Yeah. Here's a question from somebody in the audience. It says, that's so cool. Do you share early drafts among the family? Bunch of beta readers.
Yeah, great question. So I do, really early drafts. Actually, my sister was because she's finished, I think, 3 books now. So she's way ahead of me. She was my first beta reader, and that's why I actually acknowledged her. So the start of the book says for my sister, and that really was, not only was she my biggest fan from the start, but her writing was so much more advanced than mine. Because when you start out as your debut novel, you're learning so much on the go, and to have someone to steer you in the right direction. And there's one way of doing that. You can just tell someone they're terrible and they need to work in it. But my sister was really great. She knows what I need to hear. I need it to be like a compliment sandwich to digest that negative criticism. So she'd give me this like compliment. She'd tell me what I was doing terribly, which would be like this whole paragraph, and then give me a nice little compliment at the end. And I think without her as a beta reader, it would be a very, very different book. And Mum was an incredible help as well, especially, funny enough, and I think Dylan could probably understand this more, especially if you ever write a book, Dylan, which is we write so much that an American audience wouldn't understand. And my mum grew up in the Bahamas, so that's just off America, really. She had a very Americanized culture. She was the person that was able to read my book and say, it was almost every paragraph. It was like, an American reader won't know that. American reader won't understand that. I think a big one that would have been a disaster is I used the word homely with an L at one point to describe something as being quite comforting and warm and cozy. And I was really happy with that word. And my mum read it and she's like, to Americans, that's the exact opposite. It comes across as like grungy and homeless. I was like, oh God, well, thanks, Mum. That would have been a disaster. My family beta readers, they're the best in the world.
I love that so much. I think it really shows in your book how reading has always been something that's important to you. Like, you can tell, I feel like, just following Everett's journey, that story has always been like a touchstone in your life. And now learning about your family, like your mom's influence and your sisters, it makes me feel even more like connected to the story in a way. So I love that you shared that. That was a great question. I loved that line of questioning. So, all right. So we've talked a little bit about some of your influences being like your family and things like that, but is there an author or a book that you read that kind of really ignited that fire in you, that made you want to take your writing seriously and work towards publication?
This is going to sound really weird. I don't want to make it sound like my trilogy is like a revenge trip in a way, but it was a book I didn't read that really spurred me on to start writing. And I'd been waiting for Doors of Stone for so long. And those first 2 books are like, sadly, like my 2 favorite fantasy books, if I'm entirely honest. I try to deny it nowadays because I'm a bit annoyed the 3rd book hasn't come out, but coming clean, I love those books. And I think you and I have talked about them quite a bit, Crystal. And
yeah,
I was waiting for Doors of Stone for so long. And I think that was like the first germination of the idea, was like, if I can't read a book, maybe I'll just write one. And I remember it got to like the 5th year that still didn't come out. And it really was that. It was the first idea that I could just write a fantasy book. And like, hats off to Rothfuss. I think that guy is a genius. So I don't want to bag him or anything like that. I think he's an absolute genius. His world building second to none. But that what you said about the mystery turning pages for you in my book, Crystal, is actually what I had in his books, where I really wanted to know what the Chandrian were, like, what were they about? Those big world level mysteries. And that was sort of a big inspiration for me, is that there is that big world level mystery that will continue through the trilogy. You finish the first book with lots of questions you want answered. And that was all Rothfuss inspired, because in my opinion, and I've never heard anyone say this, so it is just my opinion, I don't think anyone does world level mystery better than Rothfuss. I know everyone just talks about his prose, but for me, I know see Dylan disagreeing. For me, he's the go-to guru in that.
Well, Dylan hasn't read him yet, so
I haven't read that one yet, no. But I've just
don't do it to yourself.
I don't know if you can beat mystery when you've got George R.R. Martin writing books. But
here's
bring it back. I've got a question in the chat from Holly, and she's asking what the hardest part of the book was to write. I just want to wedge into that. Going through the parts where this book starts off very cozy, very homely at the beginning, and then goes very dark at the end. Did you find it easier to write like the nice happy fairy tale stuff at the start, or did you find it harder to write when things got real dark towards the end?
Yeah, good question. It was a bit frustrating because I found the cozy stuff hardest to write. And unfortunately, that also was sort of slotted in with the fact that it was my first time ever writing. So I knew I wanted to take it dark, but I knew that darkness is only really dark when it's contrasted to light. So I needed to start somewhere light and cozy to actually make it hit harder when it went to more of a grim, dark-esque territory, in my opinion. But yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to books 2 and 3 because now I don't need to start off cozy. I can continue on with the darker theme because that is Everett's journey, and that's sort of the going from a light side of a story to a darker world was really just to reflect Everett's internal journey. So I needed to have that. And now that Everett's had that journey, and I won't obviously spoil it, but now it has gotten a bit dark. I am looking forward to writing books 2 and 3 and not having to do a warm, cozy beginning.
No, I think that, something that I am usually pretty critical about in books is when like the tonal shift happens too abruptly. Like when you're in one area in the book and then all of a sudden a change happens and there's no nuance, there's no subtlety, there's no like leading you to get there. And sometimes that can be effective for sure. But one thing I really appreciated about your book is just the big range of tone in this book, So we start out cozy, then we end very dark. And it never felt like, even though there are moments for sure that designate this is when things start to get dark, you can also, once I finished looking back, you can see there are hints along the way that it's not going to end up well for him. He's going into a dark journey. It's going to get a lot darker. So is that now, I know you said that because it was your first book, did you always plan and intend to get that dark?
I didn't really plan for too much. I'll be entirely honest. So I started with character. So started with the character and created the world around them. And a lot of the decisions were actually informed by the characters. I didn't try to force them to do anything. I sort of let them go in this world and followed along. So the dark turns it took was sort of because of the characters' decisions, which I never preempted. I'm a big believer in not like forcing a character to do something. And you certainly can, but I can often see writers that have done that. It starts to feel fake if a character is doing something they don't want to do. And ironically, I wasn't 100% sold on Everett not going to the magical university at the start. I thought it was a cool premise, but I had the characters fall into my head. And I've got this notepad in this room right there at the bottom of this cardboard box. And it is like this big with just full of like class schedules, the subjects they teach. I bloody had all the teachers' middle names. Like I created this whole school, and you do that with world building for fantasy. I'm not the only fantasy author in particular, has wasted a lot of time world building for things that don't happen. So yeah, I sort of prodded Everett to go to this university, but he didn't want to go. That was the character who he was, and that was really frustrating because it's like, God damn you, Everett! Like that's a lot of work wasted. But then he took his own journey, and I never knew how dark it was going to get. That just happened because the decisions he made to reflect his inner journey. And I think me not knowing, to answer your question, actually made it a lot more fun for me to write because it was almost more of a reading experience for me. As you can understand, is if you haven't planned out every single minute of what's going to happen, you almost get to watch the action live. And for a writer, I just think that's infinitely more fun than, oh God, I've got to have this happen to Everett in this chapter. Let's put those words on the page.
Yeah. Well, it works. It definitely works. Dylan, did you? It looked like you were going to say something, and I think I may have cut you off. I apologize.
No. I don't have a train of thought now.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
You're good. You're good.
Let's take Ben's question, because I thought this was a good one too. Did you have the magic system planned from the start, or was it something that came out of the world building?
The magic system was part of the world building. That was planned from the start. So speaking of my method of writing was, I created the characters and then created the world around them. So the characters fell into my head and then I created the world around them. The magic system was part of that world. And how I saw it with the magic system and the world building was trying to meet you on your level, Crystal. I know temp and bowling's a really big thing in the States. So I sort of had it as like the characters with the bowls, and then the world building was sort of like those little bars that pop up along the lane for kids, so the ball can just do that. So those two bars were was the world building, and the magic system was a part of that. So from the very start, the magic system was there, and that's something I'm actually really, really passionate about. It was unfortunate Everett kept making these decisions where we didn't get to explore the magic system too much. Magic isn't a huge part of this book. There was lots of instances where Everett could have used magic to help himself out, but just chose not to. And so I'm really looking forward to book 2 and 3, because I think we'll really delve a bit deeper into that magic system as well.
I'm very excited about that. So can we talk about books 2 and 3? What are your plans? So it is going to be a trilogy, correct? At this point.
Yeah. So it's a trilogy. I have written to steer my characters. I've actually written the last chapter of book 3. So I know where it needs to get to. I'm just hoping the characters comply and we can sort of make our way there. I guess that's a TBC. But books 2 and 3, and I guess my plan, I know I have one friend watching this now, so I can only really say one thing, is to just get them written as soon as possible. So some of my beta readers have actually had the book now for 6 months. So I'm actually already getting complaints about the delay. And funnily enough, actually, the guy who's on me the most was also my most critical beta reader. He was a friend I met in England. He's a French on exchange. He was French. And I can still remember his feedback call because it came at 2 a.m. because he didn't think about the time difference in Australia. So I actually picked up the call and it was just straight away, terrible start. It is no good. There is no hook. And I was like, oh, are we talking about the book? He's like, yeah, no good start. And then I was like, okay. And like 10 seconds later, he was already going like, when do I get book 2? And I was like, oh, wow, okay, just give me a couple of years. So he's like messaging me monthly, like, how's the writing going? And I think he might have enjoyed the end better than the start. So he's really on my case. So that's the plans now, is get him done ASAP, because we don't want another Doors of Stone.
No, definitely not. Or Winds of Winter, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Alex said earlier in the chat, love the book, just finished it. Pressure the author to get on to the writing of the second one ASAP, please. So, just thought I would.
That's
that
not the guy either. That's not Sylvan, but I will be onto that. I promise you, Alex.
So, do you have a publication goal or schedule for book 2, or not quite yet? I know your first book just came out, but everybody who reads it, they're going to be hungry for that next book. So not quite yet. Just keep an eye on your socials, right?
Yeah, and I really respected something that Sanderson does, is he gives you the percentage of progress. So I'm actually heavily writing book 2 at the moment. So on my website, entergyro.com, I've got the percentages, and I was thinking of actually putting that on Goodreads as well. So I think I tipped on to 22% the other day of book 2. And that's just something like I've sort of taken from Sanderson, where I love being able to look at where Wind and Truth was, see him working away, look over his shoulder. I'm trying to do that as well.
That's awesome. Wonderful. Okay, so what is it that you think makes a great story? What is something that you think makes a great story that you're reading that you try to put into your books?
Yeah, for me, like a great story, or what makes a great story, is about the interaction between the reader and the author. I don't think you can intrinsically actually say, "Hey, that there is a great story." I think if we're ever commenting on a great story, it's actually, the comment is about the interaction between the reader and the author. And I think if you actually understand it that way, is you start to see that the reader brings so much to the table. If I'm writing something and I talk about a snow-capped mountain, I'm not going to go into it too much. If I do, it's going to piss the reader off because they've seen a million snow-capped mountains in their life. They're just going to make one. They're going to make one way better than I could create by just making like an amalgamation of all the snow-capped mountains they've ever seen. And I think that's fantastic because they can choose what the mountain looks like rather than me forcing it down their throats. However, if I was to describe a snow-capped mountain to someone who'd never seen one, I was lucky enough, I go to New Zealand snowboarding like once a year. We go every July. But maybe I've not been empathetic enough for people who have never seen a snow-capped mountain, so they might have liked the description. Instantly, that paragraph's going to suck for them. Maybe if the story's set on a snow-capped mountain, the story might even suck for them. So I think for me, a great story is where there's that deep understanding between the reader and the author. And I for the most recent read I had where I just thought that was a great story was The Sword of Kaigen, M.L. Wang. It really just hit in here. And I was talking to you about that before, is it had that emotional gut punch because there was that understanding between myself and the author, like M.L. Wang, how deeply thematic it was. And she dealt with themes that I dealt with in my childhood as well, that I'd never really put into words. And actually, it was actually quite cathartic for me to experience that journey with her. So I would call that a great story. But if you'd never dealt with any of those family things growing up, then it might not be a great story for you. So yeah, I know it's a pretty shitty answer to your question. It's not a very exact one. But yeah, it varies from reader to reader, I feel.
I think that's a perfect answer, honestly. I think that shows such a great respect for your readers, for all readers, and for the reading experience, you know? I think, the longer that I've been on social media making book videos and talking about books, the more and more aware I am of just how individual every reading experience is, and there really isn't an ultimate, this is a perfect book or this is not. It's so much of our own world experiences. We always bring that to every single book that we read, and maybe it's going to hit with us and maybe it's not. It just depends on that. And I think it takes a lot of courage and a lot of sensitivity for an author to recognize that and then to be able to put that into their books and have the reader pick up on that, So I think that's a perfect answer. I think it's wonderful.
Thanks, Crystal.
All right, let's get this question because I think it was a good one. As it was your debut book, what was your favorite and least favorite part of the writing journey? Are you happy you've entered the writer's world?
Okay, it's a really good question.
Yeah, it is.
But I love to complain, so I'll start off with the least favorite part first. Was I didn't realize how much, and I touched upon this before, like how much world building you do that isn't seen by the reader. And I didn't really appreciate that at first. So you kind of think, yeah, you're going to create this really vivid world and the reader's just going to experience it all. But the reality is they don't experience half of it, 3/4, 90%. It's actually more like 1% or like 2% at most that they're actually going to see of your world. And that's something you got to learn to live with, that there is so much more behind the curtain that they're just never going to see. But actually, in reality, it's a really good thing. I think it's a really good thing because the reader doesn't need to know all that stuff. They need to know what's relevant to the protagonist solving the problem, or at least in my opinion. If you take them off on too many different tangents, if things don't go anywhere, I tend to find that I've had experiences like that where it just felt like a character's arc went nowhere. And I thought that often was because it never contributed to the protagonist solving the problem of the story. So that world building, it really sucks because like I created a sport in my world, riverball, as you both know, a water sport that I thought was a hell of a lot of fun. I
It
spent a
was.
week writing the history of how that sport was invented, and it's just never going to come out. It's in this similar box that I was talking to you about before. It's in a notepad in that room there, and it will never see the light of day. But the funniest thing about it is, and this was one of my big learning curves for the writer's journey that the question asker mentioned, it was if that notepad doesn't exist, for some reason, Riverball won't feel real. I don't know how that works. Like, you'll never hear that history. But if it wasn't in that notepad, the sport itself won't feel real. It won't feel fun. So you've got to put the work in, and that generally, like, I've been going for 3 years. In the first year, I didn't put pen to paper. I really was just creating the world. Didn't start chapter 1 till a year after, and that whole year, I reckon you guys would have seen 1 to 2% of that. But that was really difficult. And I guess the most enjoyable part is when your characters surprise you. It's I feel like you've created a really I never felt like I created them. They really just felt like they fell into my head, which I thought was kind of cool. But they felt so real to me when they made decisions I didn't see coming, and that was very enjoyable.
I love that answer. And I do feel like, when I was reading the Riverball scenes, it felt very real. It felt like this is a game that he has very much, thought about all aspects of it, and we're seeing a tiny part, but because you have all of it planned out, the history and everything, it feels solidly real, even though it's a fantastical element. So I think that is a really interesting point, that readers are never going to see all of that, but we feel the effect of it when we're reading it, and you're right, if that didn't exist, then it wouldn't feel solidly real. It would just feel maybe gimmicky or something like that. So
Yeah,
that's a great one.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so do you write every day? So take us through what does a writing day usually look like for you?
Yeah, so I do write every day. I'll be honest, I'm a bit of obsessive with writing. It's my favorite thing to do. So I'm 7 days a week, up nice and early writing. Obviously, on the weekends, I'll finish up at about midday and go do other stuff and kind of catch up with friends, family, my partner, do some fun stuff. But typical writing days, I just get up and get straight into it. It's one of those things where it's the only job I've ever had where I drink a lot of cold tea because I often will make a tea, I'll put it down, I'll start writing. I won't realize, I'll think it's about 5 minutes, but it's actually been about 2 hours. And all of a sudden I'll have a sip of my tea and it's icy cold. But that's pretty much my day, is just making cups of tea over and over and over and never getting to drink them.
So tea is something that you need, right? I'm joking. You don't really need it, but it's sort of a routine. You make some tea and then you forget about it as you're writing.
Yeah, well, I do need it, Crystal, because my English heritage and I lived in Manchester for 5 years. Like, it was like the amount of tea they drink in Manchester. I think it's because you're so cold. You just want something to warm you up. And my first job is in this little startup. And I don't know if they were saving costs. It was a little startup in recruitment, but there was no heater in that office. And yeah, I guess startups, you do need to be quite careful with your spending. But I remember I was just drinking like 20 teas a day, like jittery, just because I wanted to warm myself up. So no, I totally need those teas, Crystal. I just prefer them warm.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't blame you. I don't blame you. I don't know if is iced tea. It's probably just a southern United States thing, iced tea, huh? Like, literally. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's spread here. That's a good idea. I should add some ice cubes, and then that's like problem solved, right?
Yeah, there you go. Good all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're working on the trilogy. You started writing, you said roughly 3 years ago. Is this the first completed book? Or do you have other attempts that you just didn't, that you maybe abandoned?
No, this was the first completed book. To be honest, I was never sure if I was going to release it. And yeah, if my beta readers had come back and told me it's terrible, I might not have. But my beta readers were really complimentary about it. They had a really good time, and that was nice to hear. Like, there was a lot to fix up, but I put in the work to fix that up. But the beta readers really enjoyed it, so I thought, yeah, okay, well, I'll release it now. But that's the thing is, as an author, you never really know where you stand with your work, because your work's your baby. Like, it's like, have you ever seen a mother say that their kid isn't as cute as they think? And I know it's the weirdest analogy to make, but I really do feel like that's an accurate one for an author. Is you always think your work's great because you're always going to please yourself. So I didn't know I was going to release it until a few of my beta readers actually really liked the story. And I was like, you know what? If I release it and no one reads it, but they do, it wouldn't have been the worst thing in the world. So yeah, it's first completed, first attempt. Yeah, we'll see how we go.
That's pretty incredible, honestly, because I have written some myself. With a few years ago, I wanted to be published, and I could never seem to get past the first draft. So I have like 3 or 4 first drafts that are finished that I just have zero desire to fix up because I don't feel like they have what it takes to be published, you know? So did you ever reach a point with your writing where you just felt like maybe you wanted to give up on it? And what was it that made you push forward, or did you ever feel like you wanted to give up on it?
I don't think I ever felt like, I mean, there's hard days. They're really, really hard days sometimes. It's like you're dripping blood off your forehead onto the piece of paper. I'm like, come on, where are these words? And they were the tough days, but I never wanted to give up on it because I was always really confident in the characters, and they were the ones that fell into my head. So it almost would have felt a betrayal of them to not finish the book. But the whole time I was like, I know these characters would be entertaining to read. And I'm enjoying watching what they do. I'm sure other people will too. So it was whether or not, I guess, the story that came out of those characters would be great. But I had those characters that I was really confident at the start. Like, I just wasn't confident about the world building. I wasn't confident about the story. But whenever I had those moments of doubt, I would just actually look back at the characters. I'd look at Din, Jibbs, Quill and Henry, and I'm like, wow, these characters, like, there's potential there. And I guess, earlier I sort of made the comment where I wanted to try something different with this book. I wanted to reverse a few tropes, not go to magical school. The thing that gave me the motivation not to give up was actually, ironically, even though I was taking a risk, and sometimes taking a risk sucks, because if this didn't work out, if people said, no, I'd rather he went to the magical school, why wouldn't he? This sucks. Then yeah, that would have sucked for me. But it was ironically that which gave me the motivation to continue, because I knew if I didn't tell this story, no one else would. So that really helped in those hard days for sure.
That's wonderful. I love that. Go ahead, Dylan.
How much did you find the story change from your first run through to what ended up being like coming out in the end? Did you find that because you've just followed your characters through each time, you have it pre-planned, that you just didn't have to change too much? There was just like some wording and structuring you had to change, or what was the biggest thing you had to edit the second time through?
It's the book changed like quite a bit as I went, because I didn't want to curtail my characters' choices too much. I feel like if you ever do try to delineate exactly where they should go, the character's decision is going to feel fake. So yeah, it changed quite a bit, but it also changed in that it got tighter and leaner as I wrote. So there was so much that just came out, and I know it's a bit of a tautology where you can take something out because it comes out, so it comes out. And there was so much like that where I'd be really happy with a certain scene, but I'd just hypothetically take it out, see if the story still worked. And if it did, the sad thing was I'd be like, oh, fuck, I really, really liked that scene. I really love that dialogue, but it's out now and it doesn't make a single difference. Those scenes, unfortunately, were sort of jettisoned and thrown in the bin. Into those notepads I keep referring to. But yeah, it's that was the big changes, was unfortunately, like two of my all-time favorite scenes in the book never made the final version because they just didn't contribute anything. And I'd hate to waste the reader's time if it's not relevant to the overall problem.
That's really cool. So trimming it was a big thing for you in this book. What's your big focus that you're thinking for the next book? What would you tell yourself if you would have to write it again? What's your current focus is now approach?
Yeah, I guess my focus would be get into it quicker. So it's the nice thing about it is with the second book, you've got the world already established in the reader's mind. It can be quite painstaking in a first book because you've really got to, I guess, unless you're Steven Erikson and you're writing Malazan, you've got to hold the reader's hand as they go along. So you've got to introduce them to the world. So you know the world so intricately. It really can feel like a walking a baby around a park exercise as you introduce the reader one step at a time so they're not overwhelmed. And that takes time to build. So I found that my first 10 or so chapters were just a bit slower because I didn't want to overwhelm the reader. And I think the exciting thing here is what I will change in books 2 and 3 is myself and you two and the readers that get to book 2 and 3. We're now all on the same page. The world's there, that's built. There needs no explanation. I actually had one of my beta readers the other day call me out on something I'd said incorrectly about a part of my world. So you know what? Even some of my readers might know my world even better than me right now. So yeah, it's going to be getting straight into it a bit more. And the thing I'm really excited about, which I said before, was diving more into the magic system. Because the magic system is one of my the things I was proudest of in the world building. But yeah, it really wasn't shown in book 1 because it wasn't necessary. But book 2 and 3, I'm hoping that it will be.
Yeah. Looks like I've got just a couple questions. Holly's asking, do you have any sort of strict routine? And do you have any tips you'd give like other writers?
Yeah. Well, I think the funny thing about writing is I can't remember the author. It might have been Agatha Christie's memoir where she said that you sort of had to bore yourself into writing. Writing's a really boring thing to do, is the honest truth. Like, it's very hard to get into writing if you've just, like, can you imagine like going out, having a few drinks, maybe going to a house party, coming home and starting to write? It's just not how life works. Or even just watching a movie before writing. The writing is going to seem dull by comparison. So I've just never heard anyone talk about this. So I'd love to give this as advice because I wish I'd been given it. Is the hardest part of writing is when you're not writing, is to be disciplined. To if you want to wake up and maybe watch some telly before writing, don't do that. Just get straight into the writing. Do the boring things first in the day. I wake up 7 days a week at 5:30 and I'm writing by 5:40. And yeah, if I did my day in reverse, like I do the fun stuff at the end of the day, if I'd done the fun stuff first, the writing would have been dead dull, unfortunately. So I think that, yeah, what Agatha Christie was getting into, and that you have to bore yourself into writing, was actually just modern day talk about dopamine. Actually controlling your dopamine. I don't think she put it in as complex terms. I don't think they even had the word dopamine back then. But yeah, just be disciplined with that. And I think my friends and family can get a bit annoyed. Like I've got a friend who's always inviting me to play golf Sunday morning and just never gives up. It's insane how persistent that guy is. But that's my writing time. So I'm committed to that. I defend that. You got to defend your process, and that's what I do.
That's great advice. Yeah.
Then
okay.
I think
Sorry. Go ahead. Go right ahead, Dylan. I apologize.
I was just going to turn the interview around on you, Crystal, and go to Holly's question, asking you what your favorite part of the book is.
Oh, are we going to do? Okay. So then you have to go next, right, Dylan? Okay. So my favorite part of the book, I feel like there are some parts of this book that surprised me that they were my favorite, because I like dark fantasy, but I don't like to stay there for a long time, So if I read a dark fantasy, then I kind of have to read something else that's lighter and happier. That's just how like my little heart can handle it. So I was surprised that there were a lot of scenes in this book, and I'm not going to spoil them because we want to keep this spoiler free. But a lot of the scenes that were my favorite were the darker ones. And not because they were dark, but because of how Everett reacted to the darkness and the things that he did in there that felt to me just so true to his character. And I liked seeing the growth that that dark spot brought out in him. I really, really liked that. So I guess my favorite part of the whole book is Everett and just watching him react and seeing him grow from a very naive, happy-go-lucky person in the beginning to someone who's been through some serious trauma and still has just a little bit of that lightness in him. And I hope that it doesn't get completely snuffed out as the books go on. And if it does, that he can find a way to bring that back, because that's an aspect of his character that I really enjoy. And I think that for a reader like me, who isn't necessarily a 100% grim dark person, that makes that bearable for me, So I loved him a lot.
Yeah, Everett was a standout for me as well. He just from the first 2 pages where he's just like, I won't even say what it is. I was able to connect to him from the first 2 pages. I was like, yep, I know exactly who this person is. I can relate to that. And that was what got me into the book. It took Sean a while to convince me to read it. He sent me the first chapter, but after I read the first chapter, I was like, all right, Everett's a highlight. I just need to know how it is. And I found the writing very easy to just binge. I could just sit down and do, a few hours at a time with just how easy it was to connect to, and just how there's always just a little bit of mystery just showing up here or there. I'm like, hang on, how does this play a role in the book? So I'd have to read another 2 chapters to see it show up again. I found that to be really, really good.
Yeah, I had a very, very almost the exact same experience. Like, obviously, I can't completely relate to Everett because I don't do the proposing in the beginning of the book, but I agree. The mystery element really kept me, like, I was constantly wondering, like, where is this going and what is this and what does this mean? Like, I had to know. So I love so much that you said that Agatha Christie was an inspiration, because looking back on it, I can totally see that, because you nailed that element of keeping me intrigued and keeping me wanting to turn pages. So I liked that a lot.
Yeah. I don't know if you have this in the US, but in Australia, I guess a woman can propose whenever she wants, obviously. But the tradition here is on a leap year, the woman has to be the one to propose. Have you
Are
ever
you
heard
serious?
that before? Yeah, on a leap year, so
No,
once every 4 years. Yeah. So
that's
you could have done it,
wild.
Crystal. You just didn't want to.
Yeah, right. That's fascinating. I've never heard that. Dylan, you know that too? Fellow
No,
authors?
this is news to me. I thought
Yeah.
Sean was just having it, pulling your leg.
No. I pulled her leg enough, but no, this is legitimate. You can propose on a leap year.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So Benjamin has a comment. Loved the book. Can't wait to read the next. Hoping for some more characters that are as devious as some of the ones in book 1. I see Dylan smiling about that as well. So any hints about that? Or are you gonna, it's okay if you don't want to say.
Well, there are. Yeah, I actually could answer that. It's there are some devious characters in book 2. There's less in book 3. There's just one particularly devious character in book 3 that's going to make an appearance. But book 2, there's actually a couple. So yeah, you got to keep your eyes out for them pretty early on. And I think one thing is you never want a character to be what they seem. I think that was kind of boring. And I enjoyed writing that in book 1, where the devious characters aren't immediately obvious as being devious. It's actually sometimes the reverse effect. So I won't say too much, because I hate spoilers as much as the next person, even though, funny enough, now that's my book, I really just want to talk about book 2 and 3, but you gotta like pump the brakes and stop yourself. But yeah, the answer is there'll be a few devious characters.
That's wonderful. All right, let's do, Alex has a question now. Do you think Everett is a reflection of yourself, Sean? Did you base the characters on people from your real life? Ooh.
In terms of Everett being like myself, I think I actually found Everett really fun to write because he was the exact opposite of me. So I actually was one of those people that I knew college and university wasn't really for me, but I just went anyway. I was always so much more of a creative, but you get pressured, and we've all been through that. And I suddenly blinked, and I'd done like a criminal. I was a criminal defense lawyer, where I'd done a law degree. I was suddenly a criminal defense lawyer, and I was doing it, and I enjoyed it, but I just knew it wasn't what I was meant to be doing. And I found it really refreshing to write Everett for that reason, because he didn't do what he just did what he wanted to do, where he never went to university. He didn't want to go to college. And I really respect those people. I've got a few friends. One of them's a carpenter, and when he was 16, he's just the nicest bloke ever, but he's also just done tremendously well because he left school at 16 and then became a carpenter. And just because of the stigma associated with not continuing your education in Australia, I know it's a big deal in the United States as well. We all thought he was crazy because he's such a bright guy. We thought like the only thing you could do is go to university and school. And Ryan did the exact opposite, and he just showed strength of character. And I think, you know what, to answer the second part of the question, is I think Everett might be based loosely on my friend Ryan. Taking that brave decision is like everyone's different. And to say that one particular route in society is right for everyone doesn't really reflect the world how I see it. So, yeah, but, funnily enough, that time as a criminal defense lawyer was really helpful for story. So that informed some of my more devious characters, because I had quite a few devious clients for obvious reasons, where they always say in movies and stuff, it's all like trials and cross-examining police officers and all that sort of exciting stuff. But the reality of my day-to-day job is it's 95% sentences where their client is pleading guilty. They're saying they've been devious, they've done it. And then some days, I remember my first year, for instance, I had to do out in the sticks, like in the outback of Australia, because you got to earn your mints somehow. And some of those courthouses, if there'd been a bar fight in that particular town the night before, under the courthouses was where there was like these practical dungeons where they'd keep these people until their sentences got heard. I'd have like 30 people there, and I'd have to defend them all on that day. And I'd have about 5 minutes with each of them to learn what was unique about them in this town to make them different from the other 30 cases, so I could tell the magistrate or the presiding judge what made them unique. So that was like really like just baptism of fire for character writing, as you had 5 minutes with these people to tell their story upstairs and hopefully get them out of on bail so they could go home to their wives and kids and all that. But I guarantee, I couldn't point to which of these people, but I guarantee a lot of those characters I met in that job would inform a lot of the characters I wrote about, because they were so interesting and just different. And meeting people who like just didn't want to leave jail, like people you couldn't understand, where they were happier in jail, so they'd commit crimes to go back in. Very early on in my career, I'd be meeting people like that. And I guess it just opens up different neural pathways. So when you're writing characters, I think the more interesting and like neurodivergent or different people you've met throughout your life, the more interesting those characters are going to be.
That is super fascinating. And I feel like learning that really shines a different light on what happens in the latter half of your book. Like that's pretty incredible. I'm very impressed. I'm very impressed by that. That's amazing. So, all right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up this live show. Dylan, do you have any last questions or anything you'd like to say before we go?
No, this has been lovely. Make sure you check out Sean's book. It is super easy to read. Fantastic characters.
Very easy to read. Don't mind my dog. I'm sorry. Very easy to read. Very easy to get sucked into. I really, really loved it. And I'm so sorry about her. She just has been
She's
so
hungry.
good this whole time.
She knows it's an hour. It's almost spot on an hour, and she's hungry.
She's like,
I'll
okay.
just say to any of my friends watching, please go check out Crystal Bookish Life's channel. She's amazing. She has the best fantasy recommendation. And go check out Spaced Out Wizard and Dylan, please. He's an absolute legend, and he recommends some great books by Christoph in particular.
That's true. That's true. I love the prop. That was fantastic. So this
Well
was
done.
wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here, for the questions. Thank you, Sean, for taking the time to be on with me. And thank you, Dylan, for being my co-host. This was absolutely great. And I will definitely have a link to Sean's website, any social medias down below, and a link to where you can purchase his book. So thanks, everybody, for joining, and I'll see you later.
See ya.
See ya.